I've only got 2 cards today, but they are packed with so many techniques, I'm going to set a counter to figure out exactly how many. These are the hottest techniques for the coolest cards. Or maybe they're the coolest techniques for the hottest cards. Either way works for me. Let's jump right in. When I think of summer, I think of hot sun and cool water, so I've got 1 card inspired by each. I'm coming in hot with my first card and a faux watercolor technique. I saw Catherine do this a little while ago. I started by swinking different yellow inks onto some watercolor cardstock. Catherine did stripes, but I'm going in a circular motion, starting with limoncello and leaving a white center as a highlight. I moved on to tiara, glitz, tiki torch, and then finally orange twist, moving outwards as I went. It's looking like a hot mess, but don't worry. Next, I grabbed a brush and some clean water, and I used it to get the color moving and to soften the blend. Once I got the brush to the oranges on the outside, I made sure to clean it before I went back into my yellow center to keep it nice and bright. To add some sparkle, I used some Cosmic Shimmer Pixie Sparkle highlights in molten gold. This is a watercolor powder with not much color, but it really packs a sparkly punch. Since my panel was wet already, I just sprinkled some over the top and set it aside to dry. Then I sprinkled some of the powder on my glass mat, added some water, and used a smaller brush to add some splatter to my card base just by tapping on the brush handle. I masked the back of the card so the splatter would only be in the front. While that's all drying, I grabbed my Essentials by Ellen Tall and Skinny Alphabet for my sunny sentiment. I see that I have some leftovers in the back of the pocket, and I quickly grabbed an old Ziploc bag to protect them so they'll be in good shape if I want to use them in future projects. Then I spelled out Sunny with my letters. I'm going to cut them from this really cool cardstock I recently purchased. It's called INCA Gold, and it's got a colorful holographic shine on it, which is really pretty. I cut it down to the size I need because there's no point having more go through my die cutting machine because the plates can leave indents on the cardstock. I only have 1 N in this alphabet set, so I'm leaving a space for it, and I'll go back and cut it separately. Cutting the letters out in order and leaving that space will leave me with a rectangle with the word cut out from it, and that can be used on another sunny project in the future. I stacked up my letters with 2 layers of white cardstock letters, some of which I had gotten from my leftovers in the back of the pocket. I want to stamp and die cut the rest of my sentiment, but I don't want it to be on white cardstock. Here's a couple of my practice panels, including a couple of angled ideas and some horizontal stripes, which is my favorite. I'll hold on to that for another card, but this one has a nice wide yellow stripe down the center and it's perfect to cut up for my sentiment. My watercolor cardstock is a bit warped, so it's not sticking to my sticky mat too well, and I'm glad I still have a magnet to hold it down. My sentiment is coming from this Happy 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 sentiment set from Honeybee Stamps. It has a fabulous handwritten font and loads of sentiments that can be used with the word happy, including wishing you a happy day, which works well with sunny too. I stamped them several times with VersaFine Onyx ink just to get a nice crisp deep black impression on that watercolor cardstock. You could cut these out with a trimmer or sentiment strips, but I have the matching die set. I just have to find the right dies. It took me a few seconds, but by looking at distinguishing features like day is the shortest word and that longer sentiment has that big W at the beginning, I managed to find them pretty quickly, and I taped them onto the panel before running it through my die cutting machine. Now that my sun panel is dry, take a look at that sparkle. I hope you can see it because in real life it's gorgeous. I want to add some interest and texture with this Pinpoint Radial Circle cover plate, but I want to match the center of the stitching with the lightest area of my watercolor panel. This isn't easy since the cover plate is solid, so I decided to cut the panel with a circle die first. Then it was really easy to line up the circle of cardstock on the cover plate die, tape it in place, and run it through again. I glued the sunny letters in place and I added the rest of the die cut sentiment, and then I finished it off with some Enchanted Forest gems from Crafty Meraki. These gems are gold with the same pink and green colors flashing from them as are on the INCA Gold cardstock. And because the layers are stacked up 3 layers high, I'm able to add some of the larger gems, and they won't stand out beyond the height of the letters and damage the envelope. I popped up the sun with some foam tape onto that card base with the gold splatter, and this sunny card is done. Today's video is part of a summer fun video hop along with these lovely ladies. It's hosted by Robin, the Delta Crafter, and I've put the full list of stops below in the description, so be sure to hop for even more inspiration. Now let's cool things off a bit. I've got a strip of cardstock here that's about the width of some packing tape, which I'll come back to, and I'm going to blend some cool colors of ink onto it. I started by going direct to paper with cummerbund ink, just pressing the ink onto the cardstock to cover it all. Then I grabbed Fiesta Blue ink and a blending brush, and this is a great tip for getting a smooth blend between colors. By having cummerbund all over and still a little wet, the Fiesta Blue will go on more easily, and as I lighten the pressure as I move from the bottom toward the top, it will blend seamlessly into the cummerbund. I left this for a few minutes to dry and smooth out a bit, and then I added some drops of water by tapping the nozzle of my misting bottle over top. Then I picked up the excess water with a paper towel, and this will leave the appearance of water drops on my panel because these inks are water reactive. I left the panel to dry completely before coming in with a strip of packing tape, and I covered the whole thing with it. This is a technique I learned from my friend Katya, and it's like faux heat embossing. Instead of coating the whole thing with embossing ink and clear embossing powder, the tape gives you a similar shiny look. I trimmed off the excess part of the panel so I won't end up trying to die cut from that. This time I'm using the Altenew bold alphabet because they're big, thick letters that will show off all my techniques nicely. Again, I have to skip a letter since I don't have two O's, and I used the E as a spacer since it has the same shape. When I went back in to cut the second O, I lined it up so I'll get another negative die cut that I can use in the future. I also grabbed this Make-A-Wish die set from Catherine Pooler because the birthday candle flames also look a little bit like raindrops, which will make a fun embellishment for this card. For another cool look, I used some Nuvo crystal glaze to add condensation to my letters. I taped them down onto a piece of acetate with a loop of tape, and then I put dots of glaze on each letter. Some of the drops were bigger and some were smaller, and I just put a few on each. Then I picked up the acetate and tilted it forward so that the glaze would run down the letters a bit, just like real condensation would. I added a little extra glaze to the C to get it running, and once I was happy with where everything was, I laid it flat and set it aside to dry. For my background, I grabbed the Simple Hill Edger mask from a Colorful Life Designs and two darker colors of blue ink, Something Borrowed and all that jazz. I've done this background before and it gives such a cool layered look of waves, which will be perfect for this card. I alternated the colors and blended just over the edge of the mask, working my way up the panel and changing the curve by moving it to the left or right or changing the angle until I was happy with the coverage. I left the top of the panel white. To place my letters, I used my mini Make Art station and a magnetic ruler along with some liquid glue. To finish my sentiment, I grabbed the Awesome and Wonderful set from Catherine Pooler. This one is similar to the Happy set I used earlier. It comes with two big words and lots of smaller add-ons that you can use to customize your message. I used You Are and Totally. To make sure they were lined up properly, I used a scrap of acetate over top of my card and I stamped it down. I could see that the totally wasn't totally straight, so I was able to adjust it, stamp it down again, adjust it again, and then finally get it right. I learned this trick from Carly, and it's a lifesaver when you're stamping at this stage of your card making process. Then I added those little raindrops that I cut earlier. They give the card a fresh, splashy look. Here's a close-up of the condensation. I think it looks super cool, don't you? Oh my goodness, I counted 20 techniques. I love how these two cards came together, and even though they're opposites in many ways, they both represent summer perfectly. Now it's time to use the link below to hop to the next stop for even more summer fun inspiration. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.